Knowing how to fertilize your vegetables, flowers, and herbs is key to a successful and productive garden. There are many different methods, philosophies, and some gimmicks regarding how to best feed plants. In this garden, I utilize organic, slow-release, and concentrated liquid fertilizers while relying on a base of healthy soil. Let's take a closer look at these specific applications and how you might apply them in your gardening practice. What's up, everyone? This is Scott from New Garden Road. I'm here to inform, inspire, and elevate you. Let me know if you like this video. Oh yeah. While you're at it, subscribe to my channel for more awesome gardening videos. So before you even get to the point of fertilizing your garden, you need to understand that it's vital to have healthy soil. This can take some time to build. Whatever your method or your style of gardening, don't skimp on your investment in the soil initially. In existing gardens, the focus shifts to seasonal maintenance. Adding compost and fertilizer ahead of planting is essential. I garden year-round here in Central Texas, and I do that twice a year. So I'm really feeding the soil as much as I'm feeding the plants as they're growing. I do take note of my garden and how it's laid out from season to season, and I make my best attempt to rotate crops on a 3 to 4 year cycle. That's not always easy to do in a raised bed garden, but you do the best you can. And if you're focused on maintaining healthy soil, that's going to go a long way. Cover crops are great because they keep life in the soil. You could use a chop and drop style cultivation to keep those nutrients in your soil. There are 3 main nutrients that are vital for plants to get growing, and that's nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium. On all commercial and organically produced fertilizers, you're going to see a ratio for those 3 main nutrients, and that will appear on those packages in what's known as the NPK. It's important to understand because when you're targeting specific crop growth, you want to align that with the primary nutrients in the fertilizer that you select. So for instance, if you're growing crops for their leafy greens such as kale and spinach, you want to be sure that the fertilizer you select has an adequate amount of nitrogen. Nitrogen is the first number in the NPK. When you grow crops for their roots, fruits, or flowers, you want to look at the available phosphorus, and that's going to be the middle number that's denoted in the NPK. Potassium is important. It promotes overall healthy cellular vigor, but it's not one that I really look at as closely as the nitrogen or phosphorus. I really like to use 2 different fertilizers in the garden, one for the leafy greens and one for the flowers, fruits, and roots. When I'm fertilizing leafy greens, I don't want a fertilizer that's also high in phosphorus. I worry about them bolting through the winter. Here in Central Texas, we can get up into the 80s in December, and I want to do everything that I can to minimize the potential for plants bolting and flowering. Likewise, when I'm looking to feed plants such as tomatoes, I don't want to feed them too much nitrogen because that's going to give me green leaves, and what I want is the tomato itself, and that's a fruit. Both of the granular fertilizers that I like to use are from Sustain. One is rated 464 and the other one is rated 824. So many times when you're looking at fertilizers, you'll see some recommendations specific to the granular slow release form, and that'll mention side dressing. Say you're growing a long row of corn, you dig a trench next to that corn, you fill it with some fertilizer, you cover it back up, and that's side dressing. So just think about your garden and how it's set up and whether or not you're doing row planting or raised beds or containers, and you can adapt your application based on what style of garden you have. In my raised beds, when I do some side dressing, I really like to get down there and pull back the mulch. It's important to get that fertilizer close to the soil, lightly integrate it into the soil. I always want to be careful not to disturb any roots or do anything that will stress the plant while it's growing. After that, I'll replace that mulch, put it back right where it was, and I'll repeat that process about every 4 weeks. So one of the primary distinctions between organic slow release and liquid concentrates is that the granular fertilizers actually help you to build soil. You're adding organic matter, that's adding mass, and that's a really important thing to do in the garden because as your plants grow from one season to the next, you'll see that soil sink down, and part of that is because the plants have actually utilized those nutrients. You'll be replacing those nutrients with compost and fertilizer each season, but you'll also be building mass with the use of granular fertilizer. Liquid concentrates, on the other hand, provide a quick feed to plants. They're really effective at feeding and helping plants grow, and that's why in my garden I like to utilize both types of fertilizer. I like to apply the granular fertilizer ahead of planting. I will say that I don't side dress my garden as regularly as I apply liquid fertilizer. In the case of kale, I will take the time to get down there and side dress because that's a long-standing vegetable, and I often grow those for 6 to 7 months. So it's important important to replace some of those nutrients, add some organic matter to the soil, and feed those greens. But in the case of radishes or lettuce, those crops are pretty fast to produce. So if I've got healthy soil, I've amended it ahead of planting, it's not likely that I'll need to side dress them with fertilizer. But I am using a liquid fertilizer, which is supplying some nutrients, and that's going to give those plants what they need to grow quickly. Again, just find the approach that best fits your style of gardening. Concentrated liquid fertilizers can be applied in two different ways. The first one I want to talk about is drenching. This is really useful for newly transplanted seedlings. You get those watered in after you planted them, and then maybe use a half strength fertilizer and drench those. That's going to get them started off really good. If you add some liquid seaweed or use a liquid fertilizer containing liquid seaweed, that's really going to help them get established and promote good root development, as well as lessen any transplant shock. But I do want to note that seaweed in and of itself is not a fertilizer. It's not a plant food. It's going to do a lot to reinforce the plant, to help strengthen it. It's like a multivitamin, all those micronutrients that we like to eat. Think about it like this: you give your plant seaweed for the same reason that you might eat some seaweed. It's those micronutrients, but it's not actually gonna sustain you. It's not like eating a meal. Drenching is also a great method if you have a small garden or you're just gardening in containers. So when you're drenching your plants with liquid fertilizer, how much do you give them? I think this is easier to assess when you're feeding potted plants or plants growing in containers, because if that liquid fertilizer starts to percolate out of that pot and run off, you know that it's not going to be utilized by the plant. Many times I like to make 3 or 4 passes with a plant and give that fertilizer time to saturate into the soil. Suffice it to say, if you're doing this on a regular basis, you're going to be providing some nutrients to those plants, and that's going to help them grow. Drenching can also be a great response for plants that have undergone some stress or have been damaged. It can help in their recovery. Just like in the case of newly planted seedlings, you may consider using your fertilizer in half strength in this application. So the other way that you can apply liquid fertilizer is with a pressurized sprayer. I've got a 2-gallon pump-up sprayer, and I really love this. I get out here early in the morning. It's really important for any of this fertilizer to dry as much as possible on your plants before that midday sun gets high in the sky. That can create a magnification effect and could possibly burn some of your plant leaves. So you don't want to apply a liquid fertilizer in the middle of a hot sunny day. First thing in the morning is going to be great, and that's when I love to be out here anyway, because I can slowly make my way around the garden, check on my plants. I'll be able to make some assessments, and I really just enjoy that time. I also think it's really easy to apply in this manner. You're going to apply it broadly. It's important to get the underside of the leaves, the top side of the leaves, and you can go ahead and apply it to the soil at this time as well. How much to apply? Again, it's kind of tricky, but just use some common sense. When you're spraying your plants and you see that fertilizer start to roll off, it's going down to the ground, it's not going on the leaves, so you've given it a good go at that point. So you've got a lot of choices to make when you're looking at fertilizers, and I just want to speak to why organic is important to me. I really feel like the NPK ratio that you find on organic fertilizers is more environmentally sensitive. Chemically produced fertilizers really have ratios that are just kind of off the charts. Plants simply can't uptake all those nutrients. So what happens to the rest of those nutrients? The potential is that they can run off into streams and lakes and create imbalances in the environment. For me, that's a principle that really just guides me in my gardening practice, and also I think it aligns with the organic gardening system. When you grow organic and you choose organic fertilizer, you're doing the right thing for the environment and for your garden. I also want to mention natural farming. I think that is a really great approach if you're looking to create your own inputs, or if you're doing some off-grid work, or if you simply don't want to buy commercially produced retail products. I completely understand that. With some of the organic fertilizers, such as fish emulsion, you may find that it's a byproduct of the commercial fishing industry. Some of you may be thinking, fish emulsion, ew, I don't want to mess with that, I don't want that smell, and I understand. I will say that it does dissipate after about 24 hours, and I really like to schedule my fertilization and my harvesting so that I've avoided bringing any of that stuff into the kitchen. It's one of the most effective things that I have found to feed my garden with, and I really don't mind the smell. I'll also mention one other product, the Medina Liquid Fish Blend. That's a great combination product. It's got some molasses, some apple cider vinegar, and some liquid seaweed in there. there. That's more of an all-around complete liquid fertilizer. So I know there's not a whole lot of clear answers in terms of how much you need and how much to spray, but I'll give you this one. I've got 19 raised beds and I have things growing in most of them right now. It takes me about 4 to 5 gallons in my pressurized sprayer to apply the fertilizer to my entire garden. Maybe that will help you or give you a point of reference. It's gonna vary based on your sprayer. I know the one that I use is really efficient and it seems like it disperses that liquid pretty quickly. There are many different approaches when it comes to fertilizing, and I want to encourage you to discover the one that best fits your style of gardening. I'll leave you with a little bit of my philosophy, and that's you got to feed those veggies so they'll feed you. Oh yeah, and that's why organic is important to me. Crashing. I'm gonna go get a drink first. So many things can go wrong. All right. Now check out some of these other awesome gardening videos on my channel. You can grow your own food. Keep it organic.